Absolutely Elsewhere by Dorothy Sayers. Lord Peter Wimsey sat in the library at the Lilacs alongside Chief Inspector Parker and Inspector Henley. Parker sighed. All the obvious suspects were elsewhere at the time. Wimsey, irritated from being dragged to Wapley without breakfast, snapped, "Elsewhere? Do you mean they'd have to travel at the speed of light to be truly absolutely elsewhere? Otherwise they were just relatively elsewhere. Heaven's sake, don't get all Einstein on me," Parker groaned. Humanly speaking, they had alibis. If we're going to pin this on someone, we'll have to work with that. Inspector Henley called in the first witness, Hanhazy, the butler. A middle-aged man with a round, pale face, he began his account without hesitation. "I served Mr. Grimbold for 20 years. He was strict but fair. A bachelor, but he raised his 2 nephews, Mr. Harcourt and Mr. Neville, and was generous to them." Hamhurdy detailed the night of the murder. He locked up the house at 7:30, Grimherd as usual, ensuring all doors and windows were secured, except for the conservatory door, which Mr. Grimbold always left unlocked in case he returned late. When asked if another key existed, Hamhurdy hesitated. "I believe, sir, that one may be in possession of a lady." "Mrs. Winter. She's in Paris now, but she lived in Wapley before her husband passed away last month." Parker made a note before continuing. "What happened at dinner?" Hamhurdy described the routine. Mr. Grimbold dined alone, soup at 7:45, fish, then pheasant. The only interruption was a phone call at 8 from Mr. Neville, confirmed by the grandfather clock chiming in the background. While Hamhurdy took the call, the front doorbell rang, twice. The cook answered. It was Mr. Payne, a frequent and troublesome visitor, presumably seeking more time to pay his debts. Returning from the phone, Hamhurst fetched the claret. When he stepped back into the dining room, he froze. Mr. Grimble had collapsed over his plate, a dreadful wound in his back. Blood everywhere, no weapon in sight. Panicked, he called for the cook. She screamed. Then he remembered Payne was still waiting. He opened the library door, and Payne, being oblivious to the chaos, grumbled, "How long do I have to wait?" Hamhurst blurted, "Mr. Grimbold has been murdered." Payne pushed past him, yanked open the curtains, and pointed to the window, now ajar. "This is how he got away." Hamhurst suspected Payne was planning an escape. But Payne insisted, "We have to look for the killer." Reluctantly, Hamhurst agreed, grabbing his torch before heading outside. They searched the garden but found nothing. No footprints, no weapon. By then it was too late to chase anyone down the Great North Road. The police arrived, questioning everyone, but Hamhurst had nothing more to add. Parker turned to Inspector Hanley. "You searched for bloodstains or a weapon?" "Thoroughly," Henry confirmed. Then Wimsey asked, "Could someone have come downstairs while you were in the dining room?" Before Henry could answer, Parker tapped his pencil against his notepad. "That, my dear Wimsey, is exactly what we need to find out." Grimbles. "Well, sir, I suppose it's possible, but they would have had to hide in the house before 7:30. They couldn't have used the back stairs without Cook hearing them. The passage is flagged, you see. The front stairs? Hard to say. Parker. That's how the intruder got in, no doubt. Don't worry, Henry. You can't be expected to check every cupboard for hidden criminals every night. Now, I'd better speak to the nephews. They got along with their uncle, I assume." "Oh, yes, sir. Never a cross word. His illness last summer was—"
"A real blow to them. It was his heart. He had a bad spell in July, but he pulled through. Still, he was never quite the same afterward. I think it made him realize he wasn't getting any younger, but no one imagined this would happen." Parker. "Do you know how his money is left?" Hamworthy. "Not exactly, sir. I believe it's split between the nephews, but they're well off as it is." Mr. Harcourt could tell you more. Parker. "Very well. Let's bring him in. Are the brothers close?" Hamworthy. "Oh, yes, sir. Devoted to each other." You couldn't ask for nicer gentlemen. Parker. Thanks, Hamworthy. That'll be all for now. Inspector. My lord, about the pheasant. Mr. Grimble had eaten some of it, maybe 3 or 4 minutes worth, but not all. No sign of him being interrupted. His chair was close to the table, napkin on his knee, knife and fork under his hands, as if he just dropped them when the blow came. Parker. And the body wasn't disturbed? Hamworthy. No, sir. Just enough to confirm he was dead, which I had no doubt about when I saw that dreadful wound. Parker. All right. Send in Mr. Harcourt. Harcourt Grimbold, a brisk-looking man of 35, explained he was a stockbroker. His brother Neville worked for the Ministry of Public Health, and their uncle had raised them since childhood. He insisted their relationship had always been kind, though his uncle had business enemies. "I can't tell you much," he admitted. "I arrived at 9:45 when it was all over. I was delayed. A tail lamp went out on the way, and a constable stopped me. Had to get it fixed at a garage in Welwyn." Parker. You drove yourself? Harcourt. Yes, I have a chauffeur, but I don't always bring him. He confirmed leaving London around 8:20, just after Neville fetched the car. He hadn't heard of his uncle's death until after setting off. Parker. What about your uncle's will? Harcourt. Mostly left to Neville and me and a Mrs. Winter. Also, Hanworthy gets a nest egg, the cook something, and a $500 legacy from my uncle's London clerk. But the bulk is ours and Mrs. Winter's. No idea how much. It was never discussed, and we never asked. We do well enough on our own. Parker. Would Hamworthy have known about his legacy? Harcourt. Oh yes, no secret there. $100 and a life interest in $200 a year as long as he remained in service. But my uncle was always threatening to sack people. Never did, though. Like the Queen of Hearts in Alice. All bluster, no execution. Parker. Now, Mrs. Winter, what do you know about her? Harcourt. A nice woman. Uncle William's mistress for years. Her husband was a hopeless drunk, so you couldn't blame her. Uncle wanted to take her away, but she wouldn't leave Winter. Now that he's passed, they were finally going to marry. She had nothing to gain from my uncle's death, unless she wanted to marry someone younger and worried about the money, but I believe she genuinely cared for him. He handed Parker a telegram from Paris. Terribly shocked and grieved, returning immediately, love and sympathy, Lucy. Parker. You were on good terms with her? Harcourt. Good Lord, yes, always felt sorry for her. Parker. Still, let's confirm she was really in Paris. I'll have her checked at the ports. Inspector, does this phone go through the exchange? Inspector. No, sir, it's a direct line. Parker put through his call to Scotland Yard, then summoned Neville Grimbold, a slightly slimmer, smoother version of his brother. He confirmed Harcourt's account, and added that he'd been at a cinema from 8:20 to 10, then at his club, learning of the tragedy much later. The cook was next. She had plenty to say, but little of use. She hadn't noticed Hanworthy go to the pantry for claret, but insisted that no one else did. It could have hidden in the house. The Daily Maid had aired the wardrobes earlier. She was certain that Payne, the moneylender, had done it. A nasty, murdering beast. Payne himself was blunt. He despised Grimbold, who had bled him dry with interest and now planned to foreclose on his house. If Grimbold had waited 6 months, Payne could have repaid him, but instead he wanted the property. His death saved my skin, Payne admitted, but I didn't kill him. Not my style. I'd have faced him head-on, not stabbed him in the back. He pointed to the blood on his coat, saying he got it struggling with Hamworthy at the window. Hamworthy had blood all over him from handling the body. He hadn't changed clothes because he didn't want to be accused of hiding something. Payne, the local police have been on me from the start, acting like I'm guilty already. Inspector Hansley. That's not true, sir. Lord Peter. Tell me this, Mr. Payne. When the commotion started with the cook screaming, why didn't you go see what was happening? Payne. Because I didn't hear a damned thing. The first I knew, that butler was standing in the doorway, hands bloody, gibbering. Wimsey. Ah, I thought that door looked solid. Shall we test it? "Inspector, have the lady scream from inside the dining room. Let's see if it carries through the house." The group sat tensely, waiting for a reaction to the screams. Nothing happened until Henley poked his head in. "Anything?" "Not a sound," Parker confirmed. "It's a solid house," said Wimsey. "With the conservatory muffling outside noise, it's no surprise Payne didn't hear a thing. Now, Charles, if we're done here, I need to get back to London, but I'll leave you with 2 leads. Find a car parked within a quarter-mile of this house between 7:30 and 8:15 last night, and gather everyone in the dining room tonight to watch the French windows. Also, lend me the conservatory key. I have a theory." Later that evening, the dining room was filled with uneasy silence. The police exchanged fishing stories, Payne fumed, the Grimbold brothers chain-smoked, and the cook and butler perched nervously on their chairs. The phone rang, breaking the tension. Parker checked his watch, 7:57.2. He left to answer, glancing at the butler, who wiped his lips with a trembling hand. "Hello," Parker said. A familiar voice responded, "Lord Peter's man here. Hold for his lordship." Then Wimsey's voice, "Hello, old chap. Found that car yet?" "We have," Parker replied cautiously. "Spotted at a roadhouse 5 minutes from here, license ABJ28. "Knew it. Hired in London at 5 p.m., returned just before 10. What about Mrs. Winter?" "She landed from France tonight. Looks like she's clear." "Thought so. Now, listen. Harcourt Grimbold's finances are a mess. He nearly went under last July, but someone bailed him out, probably Uncle William, and now, with the inheritance, he can cover his losses. Convenient, no?" A distant chime interrupted. "Recognize that?" Wimsey asked. "My sitting-room clock in London." "All right, exchange. Give me 3 more minutes." Then Bunter, Wimsey's valet, took over. "His lordship requests you return to the dining room immediately." Parker obeyed. Inside, 6 people sat frozen, eyes locked on the French windows. Then the library door creaked open, and in walked Lord Peter Wimsey. "Good God!" Parker breathed. "How did you—" "Light waves, my friend," Wimsey grinned. "Traveled 80 miles at 1.86000 miles per second." With Harcourt restrained and Neville revived with brandy, Wimsey laid it out. The murder had to happen between 7:57 and 8:06. The prolonged phone call was key. Harcourt had to be in the library before it started. The answer? Harcourt had left London at 6, driving a hired car. He parked near the roadhouse, walked the last quarter-mile in silence, and used a duplicate key, stolen from his uncle months prior, to slip into the conservatory. He waited. When Neville called from London at 7:57, Harcourt picked up in the library, seamlessly joining the conversation. At 8, the chime from the London office phone proved the call was still active. At 8:03, Neville stalled the butler, giving Harcourt time to enter the dining room, stab his uncle, and escape through the window. The brothers later swapped cars near Welwyn, ensuring an alibi. Neville returned to London in the rental, while Harcourt drove back here in his own. "The weapon key and bloody clothes?" Wimsey concluded. "Probably dumped in the Thames, but it's checkmate, gentlemen." And that was the end of the Grimbold brothers.